trying to get cricket matches on TV. Most of the matches, 99% of the matches that ESPN owned cricket rights wise in the US were streamed online. But there were a few instances where you were successful at getting games on actual ESPN television. I remember there were a couple IPL games, and then also the 2012 T20 World Cup final. I remember that was, again, started that ICC TV rights deal. That final between Sri Lanka and the West Indies was one of the rare events cricket-wise that was actually shown, not just on ESPN streaming, but it was shown on ESPN2, on ESPN television. So from your standpoint, what do you feel were the crowning achievements and successes that you feel that you were most proud of from that standpoint in helping to get cricket more broader exposure? A, and B, what were the challenges that you faced internally in terms of the pull from other people involved in programming decision making to try and get cricket prioritized for those kind of big events?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Peter. And I would say it's probably the same today at ESPN potentially as it was. And again, I haven't been there for about 6 years. ESPN's blessed and with a lot of hardworking people that do a wonderful job of acquiring rights. So the cupboard's always full, as you mentioned, right? NFL, college football, college basketball, NBA, MLB, the list goes on of just really uber popular sports here in America. And cricket's on the come. But it's, no one's going to say that, hey, cricket rivals baseball in popularity today in the U.S. Hopefully someday. I know Ian Higgins and the team are working very hard to continue to grow cricket in the U.S. And there's no doubt that we'll get there. It just takes time. So I think a crowning achievement probably would have been getting, the 2012. And if my memory is accurate, I think we also had the 2014 World T20 Championship also on ESPN2. My memory may be hazy on that. Too much Florida sun, but definitively we got the 2012 on. And you're right. I mean, it was one of those things where, you had to displace other tried and true programming. And that's, not easy to do. And, ESPN, along with Disney, is obviously a publicly traded company. Every ad unit counts, eyeballs count. You're trying to, hit sponsorship goals, et cetera. And you're saying, okay, we're going to displace Outside the Lines and whatever else was on that morning on ESPN2. And instead, we're going to show a cricket match that was probably, I'll say, lightly sold, right? Because, and Prasad Prasad was, I'm sure, involved at some point in the ad sales piece of that. It wasn't like ESPN had 30 people out trying to sell cricket. It was probably like Prasad, right? He was probably the main guy who was trying to do it at the time. So you're trying to balance. We're taking a revenue hit, but we're trying to expose the sport and continue to grow it here in the U.S. And like many sports, right, the path is showing it to more eyeballs. Because I truly believe if you watch a cricket match, if you don't fall in love with it, I would be surprised. Right. And especially if you have an opportunity, as Peter, you and I have, of actually going to matches. Again, I mentioned earlier about, John Laxford came in, my boss, and said, hey, you're going to take over cricket. And I got to go to places that probably the average American will never go. I've been to Sri Lanka twice. I've been to Bangladesh. I've been to India. I've been to the UK. I've been to some Caribbean islands, which, again, a lot of Americans may go to that till they on the beach, but they're not going to watch a cricket match. I've been to Australia. And you just sit in the stands in like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka and you just see 30, 40,000 people just on the edge of their seat, the passion, the constant cheering for 3.5 hours. And you come back and you're just like, how does not all 330 million Americans just love the sport? And you're like, oh, yeah, it's because many of them haven't been exposed to it. We've got to expose more Americans to the sport. And I think if they watch it, especially if they were to watch it with like Kaylee, maybe Peter, you and I should and my bosses, hopefully you're not listening to this, we should quit our jobs and just go house to house, right? and sit with people and watch a match because, hey, I appreciate one of the barriers is, the rules. Every sport has idiosyncrasies, but the general rules aren't impossible to catch up on, right? But you just need to sit with someone who actually knows the game. So you're like, okay, well, here's why this happened. Oh, okay, I get it. No different than if you never watched an NFL game, you're like, after every play, why do they come back and huddle up and then quarterback looks over here and there's substitutions? Like you need someone to tell you what's happening. And it's the same with the strategy around cricket. So again, hopefully my bosses aren't listening. I'm not looking to quit and go door to door and educate people on cricket. It would be fun, but we just need to figure out collectively, you, me, ESPN, because they still have rights, Willow TV, USA Cricket. How do we bring more people in the tent to experience the game? And again, I will be surprised if a whole bunch of people as they walk out don't absolutely just fall in love with it.
On that point, I remember when I was in Connecticut ahead of the 2014 T20 World Cup, I held a seminar for ESPN.com editorial staff, and it was just to try and get people excited about the T20 World Cup that was coming up, that ESPN had the rights for, the show in the U.S., and build up more enthusiasm and support, and kind of break down the barrier in terms of, like, if we had a featured cricket article, it wasn't invading ESPN.com. It was something that would be, like, welcomed, and they would appreciate and kind of understand the significance of why certain content would be promoted on a certain day for the World Cup, and that there was a legitimate reason to make sure it did get in the headline stack and to get good coverage, and it wasn't just a nuisance like, oh geez, here's the cricket guy, oh god, we got to put up with him. And what I experienced was, and this is not unique to ESPN in terms of the staff there and just other sports people in general, like you said, you expose somebody to it. It's hard not to like, and one of the things I did, I cut up a series of highlight clips from some of the other matches before the World Cup. So in particular, I think it was a Sri Lanka-New Zealand one-dayer, where I cut it down to about a 20-minute highlight package where I try to get as much variety in terms of dismissals, runouts, bolds, LBWs, catches, balls hitting the stumps, guys hitting boundaries, guys hitting sixes, just so they could get a taste of everything. And in terms of the editorial staff, so like Chris Ramsey, who was one of the basketball editors, was there. Right. And for people who don't know, he's the son of Dr. Jack Ramsey, the NBA Hall of Fame legend coach, title-winning coach, I think, with the Portland Trail Blazers. And some of the other ESPN editors there who were from football and basketball, hockey, other sports, they were all there. And it wasn't like they were itching to get out of there at the end. It was I basically just played the highlight video, and I said, all right, you guys watch. And this is what I try and do with everybody. You guys watch. If and when you have questions, just ask, and I'll pause the video, and we can go over what's happening. But I'll just let you guys watch and learn and absorb yourself, because I think, again, one of my frustrations with the cricket community is they assume everybody's an idiot. And they assume everybody's stupid, and they assume that people can't understand certain things in cricket. Yes, some of the rules are complicated. Some of the things can be complex, but at the end of the day, at its essence, cricket is a see the ball, hit the ball game. The ball hits the stumps. Even if you don't know cricket, all right, you can figure out guys gotten out, the graphics come up on the screen, he walks off the field. And people were very receptive to it. There was not this combative attitude. I think that there's this stereotype that exists out there that the American sports community is combative or there's this resistance. And in my personal experiences, that wasn't the case. A lot of the people at ESPN were very, very supportive. I appreciated it, and I know a lot of other people who I worked with on the Crick Info staff and people who were doing video editing work for highlights content were there. One of the things I remember most, you said again, you're talking about matches that were shown on TV. During the final, there was a commitment from SportsCenter that they were going to show some sort of highlight, whether it was 30 seconds or 40 seconds, whatever. I was responsible for basically putting together a script and creating pronunciations, doing a pronunciation name guide for all the names that were. And so in my head, I was praying like, oh, geez, I hope Sri Lanka doesn't make the final. If Australia and New Zealand make the final, it would make my life so much easier. Because there's a reluctance of some of the anchors. They don't want to be put in an embarrassing position, which is understandable. They don't want to be made fool of. And they want to maintain their own presence and sound like they've got an authority and a grasp of the content and all that. So you don't want to put them in a tough spot. But I always appreciated Lisa Kearney. Lisa Kearney was the anchor. She stepped up and she said, I'll read it. I'll do the cricket highlight. And again, sometimes over the course of history at ESPN, there have been some anchors who they kind of see a cricket clip that gets put in front of them and they just kind of like give it this really tongue-in-cheek, oh, cricket, what's cricket? Why am I reading this? But she took it very seriously. Again, there was support there. She took it very seriously. She read it, gave it the respect of any other highlight that she would read. Right. And again, there was a respect. There was an appreciation there that cricket, there is a capacity for cricket to fit into the sports landscape. Lisa Kearney now is a host for FanDuel Sports Betting. They do some sports betting shows, and she's moved on to there. But I've reached out to her a handful of times over the years just to, again, say thanks and appreciation. And she remembers doing the cricket. And so there is scope within ESPN, and there is scope within the broad sports community that I don't think a lot of people appreciate. And you've experienced that yourself. Yeah, for sure. And, one of the things, with cricket, I remember – we had a conversation, I don't know at the time who was like the coordinating producer, but was when they do the cricket highlights is there's a line between being funny, which many of the anchors are, right? I mean, you can be funny versus making fun of. Yes. Right?
which in both instances, the average viewer may chuckle, but that's not what we were going for, right? So we wanted them to have their personality come through in the cricket highlights that they did do, of course. But as you said, Peter, don't make fun of the sport. Again, it's legitimately the second most popular sport in the world. And some of these players, like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen Chris Gale in person, Kieran Pollard in person. Like, if they had grown up in the U.S., Chris Gale would probably been like a middle linebacker, right? I mean, the guy's just like incredible. I know he's older now, but say 10 years ago, right? I mean, I'm not saying he's not in good shape now, Chris. You're still in very good shape. I'm not disputing it, right? So you can beat me running, lifting, everything, right? But 10 years ago, I mean, he was just ripped, and you just look at him and you'd be like, dude, you could be a middle linebacker playing for an NFL team. And also Kieran Pollard's, I don't know what he could be tight end. I don't know.
He took the words out of my mouth. He would be, with his hands, his size, he would be an incredible tight end. Exactly.
So you see these folks playing, and it's like they are athletic marvels at what they do. It's just that, again, to your point, many of the U.S. audience and the SportsCenter announcers just didn't have a lot of exposure to seeing them. So it was easier to, as you would say, kind of have a joke or a little bit of a crack against cricket when it really wasn't doing us any favors. So, but, to the credit of Lisa and, the other SportsCenter anchors that ultimately did other highlights along the way, like, they kind of stopped doing that, and they realized, like, this is a real sport. And candidly, ESPN/Disney, was making a major investment in acquiring these rights, and the goal was to grow the game. And by, again, I would say making fun of the game, that doesn't get people in the camp to want to watch.
I said Lisa Kearney. One of the other ones I want to mention too, who is really, really supportive, who has moved on. He's moved up the ranks. He's up to college football, doing college football Saturday, college football scored. Matt Barry. Matt Barry was very, very supportive. He's a fantastic guy. And whenever there was a cricket highlight that was being put forward potentially to squeeze into SportsCenter, he never turned it down. He was always very, very willing and supportive. Right. And I always appreciated Matt Barry and Lisa Kearney for doing that. You need those kind of people on your side.
And like I said, pronouncing the names was a big one too, right? So I imagine it would have been much easier for them to say, Steve Smith, bowling, or caught by Kane Williamson, or some other just more English names, if you will, versus, you're trying to get, Virat Kohli and Kumar Sangakkara and, Anil Kumble and names like that they're just like, how do you pronounce this, and mispronouncing it. And that was, a while ago. Imagine now it would be with Twitter and Instagram and all that. Now it would be even worse if someone mispronounced somebody's name.
Well, I can vouch for Lisa Kearney. I gave her the pronunciation for Kumar Sangakkara, and she had it roll off the tongue perfectly. No That's problem. Good. And if you do sports highlights and you're used to doing long and complicated Russian ice hockey player names, cricket should be like a walk in the park for you.
For sure. Exactly. Exactly.